You finally hit your first $1,000 in savings. You checked your account 3 times just to make sure, and then you waited for something to feel different, for life to feel easier, for that weight on your chest to lift. Nothing changed. Your rent's still the same, your car still makes that noise, you still can't afford that trip you've been planning. That $1,000 sits there doing absolutely nothing visible for your life. And this is where most people break. They think they did something wrong. They think saving money is supposed to feel rewarding. They think the first $1,000 should buy them something tangible, peace of mind, security, options. It doesn't. Here's what nobody tells you about saving your first $1,000. It's not supposed to change your situation. It's supposed to change you. And that shift is so subtle, so invisible, that most people quit 3 weeks before it starts working. The first $1,000 isn't a financial milestone, it's a behavioral one. You're not building wealth yet, you're building the person who can. Go back to the moment you decided to save. You probably had a number in your head. Maybe it was $1,000, maybe $5,000. Maybe you didn't even have a specific number, just this vague idea that saving money would make you feel more secure. You cut back on something, eating out maybe, coffee runs, that subscription you forgot you had. The first $100 came easy. You felt motivated. You felt disciplined. You imagined what it would feel like to see that account grow. Then month 2 hit. The motivation wore off. Savings stopped feeling like progress and started feeling like punishment. Your friends went out. You stayed home. They bought new things. You said no. And that number in your account climbed so slowly it barely felt real. But you kept going because you told yourself it would be worth it. You told yourself that once you hit your first $1,000, something would shift. Maybe you'd feel different. Maybe you'd have options. Maybe you'd finally feel like you were ahead instead of behind. And then you hit it, your first $1,000 in savings. You stared at that number, you felt proud for about 6 seconds. Then you felt nothing, because nothing in your life was different. You still had the same job, the same bills, the same stress about money. The only thing that changed was a number on a screen. This is the moment most people quit, not because they failed, because they succeeded and it didn't feel like they thought it would. They saved their first $1,000 and it changed nothing about their day-to-day reality. So they convinced themselves it wasn't worth it. They pull the money out, they spend it on something that feels more immediate, more real, and they never find out what happens next. Because here's the truth about your first $1,000. It's not meant to feel good. It's not meant to change your circumstances. It's not meant to give you visible results. Delayed gratification at this level doesn't reward you with comfort. It rewards you with confusion. You did everything right and nothing feels different. That discomfort is the point. You're not saving $1,000 to have $1,000. You're saving $1,000 to prove to yourself that you can delay a reward, that you can build something invisible, that you can choose future you over current you. And that muscle, that ability, is worth more than the money itself. But it doesn't feel like it, because you can't see it, you can't spend it, you can't show it to anyone. All you have is a number and the uncomfortable realization that hitting your goal didn't fix anything. Let's talk about what the first $1,000 actually does, because it does do something, just not what you think. The first $1,000 breaks your identity. Most people don't see themselves as savers. They see themselves as people who live paycheck to paycheck, people who can't afford to save, people who will get to it later when they make more money. That's not a financial position. That's an identity. And your brain will fight like hell to protect that identity. Because if you're not a saver, then not saving makes sense. It's consistent. It's predictable. You don't have to face the uncomfortable gap between who you are and who you want to be. But when you save your first $1,000, something cracks. You can't tell yourself you're not a saver anymore. You just proved you are. You delayed gratification for months. You made choices that felt bad in the moment. You prioritized something invisible over something immediate. That's not something a non-saver does. So your brain has 2 options: accept the new identity or reject the behavior. Most people reject the behavior. They find a reason to spend that $1,000, an emergency, a sale, a one-time thing, because spending it lets them go back to who they were before. Spending it means they don't have to change. But if you don't spend it, If you let it sit there doing nothing, you're stuck with a new version of yourself, a version that can save money, a version that can delay rewards, a version that can build something without immediate feedback. And that version is uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. This is why saving money feels so much harder than spending it. Spending confirms who you already are. Saving challenges it. And most people will choose comfort over growth every single time. The wealthy never celebrate their first $1,000. You know why? Because they already know what it's for. It's not a destination, it's proof of concept. It's evidence that you can function without immediate gratification, that you can tolerate discomfort, that you can delay. That ability is the real asset, not the money, the behavior. Because once you prove you can save $1,000, you can prove you can save $5,000, then $10,000, then $50,000. The dollar amount doesn't matter. The pattern does. But here's what makes this brutal. The first $1,000 gives you no external validation. Nobody sees it. Nobody congratulates you. Nobody treats you differently. You're building something invisible in a world that only rewards what's visible. And that gap between effort and recognition is where most people break. You spent months building discipline, you made sacrifices, you delayed rewards, and at the end of it all, you have a number on a screen that changes nothing about how the world treats you. Your landlord doesn't care, your boss doesn't care, your friends don't notice. All you have is the quiet knowledge that you did something hard. And for most people, that's not enough. They need the reward to feel immediate. They need the change to feel visible. They need someone to notice. And when none of that happens, they convince themselves the whole thing was pointless. 3 months later, the account's back to zero and the cycle starts over. Here's the part most people miss. The first $1,000 isn't supposed to protect you. It's supposed to train you. You've been operating on instant feedback your whole life. You work, you get paid. You spend, you get the thing. You want something, you find a way to get it now. That's the system you're fluent in. Immediate reward for immediate action. Wealth building doesn't work like that. Wealth building is delayed everything. Delayed reward, delayed feedback, delayed validation. You put money in and nothing happens. You keep putting money in and still nothing happens. Then years later, something happens. But by then, you've been operating in the dark for so long that you've either quit or built enough tolerance to keep going. The first $1,000 is your training ground. It's where you learn to tolerate the gap between action and result. It's where you build the skill of trusting a process that gives you no immediate evidence it's working. And most people can't handle that. They need to see progress. They need to feel different. They need proof that it matters. But wealth building doesn't give you proof at $1,000. It doesn't even give you proof at $10,000. At $1,000, all you have is potential energy. It's not doing anything yet. It's not earning significant interest. It's not giving you options. It's not changing your situation. It's sitting there waiting for you to add to it. And that's the test. Can you keep building something that isn't giving you feedback? Can you keep saving when it doesn't feel like it's working? Can you delay the reward long enough to see what happens when compound interest finally kicks in? Most people can't. They hit $1,000, realize it changes nothing, and stop. They don't make it to $3,000 where the habit becomes automatic. They don't make it to $10,000 where the interest starts becoming noticeable. They don't make it to $50,000 where the money starts working harder than they do. They quit at $1,000 because $1,000 feels like nothing. And here's the painful part. They're not wrong. At $1,000, it is nothing. Financially speaking, $1,000 won't change your life. It won't cover a major emergency. It won't let you quit your job. It won't buy you freedom. It's a buffer, sure, but it's a thin one. So why does it matter? Because you're not building a financial buffer. You're building a behavioral one. You're proving to yourself that you can save without seeing results, that you can delay without getting discouraged, that you can build invisible things in a visible world. That skill, that tolerance, is what separates people who build wealth from people who stay broke. The first $1,000 is a filter. It filters out everyone who needs immediate gratification to keep going, everyone who needs external validation to stay motivated, everyone who quits when the results don't match the effort. If you can't handle the discomfort of saving $1,000 and having nothing change, you won't handle the discomfort of saving $50,000 and still not feeling rich. Because here's what nobody tells you. Even at $50,000, you won't feel rich. You'll feel more secure, sure. You'll have options, but you won't feel wealthy. Wealthy is a moving target. It's always farther than where you are. And if you're waiting to feel wealthy before you keep going, you'll never make it. You're building someone you've never been, someone who can delay rewards, someone who can build invisible things, someone who can tolerate the gap between effort and recognition. That person doesn't exist yet. The first $1,000 is where you start building them, and most people quit right before they finish. Let me tell you what actually happens after the first $1,000. Not what people say happens, what actually happens. You hit $1,000 and nothing changes. You already know that. But then you keep going. Maybe because you're stubborn. Maybe because you already came this far. Maybe because you don't know what else to do with the momentum. So you save $1,100, then $1,200, then $1,500. And somewhere around $1,500, something shifts. You stop checking your account every day. You stop obsessing over the number. You stop waiting for it to feel different. Because you finally accept that it won't. This money isn't here to make you feel better. It's here to exist. And that acceptance changes everything. You start seeing money differently, not as something to spend or save, but as something to allocate. You stop asking, can I afford this? And start asking, is this worth delaying everything else I want? That's a completely different question, and it leads to completely different choices. By month 6, the behavior becomes automatic. You save before you see the money. You don't debate it. You don't negotiate with yourself. You don't wait to see if you have money left over at the end of the month. You save first, then live on what's left. And somehow you still make it work. Not because you're making more money, because you adjusted to less. This is the part people don't believe until they experience it. Your lifestyle expands to fill your income. If you make $3,000 a month, you'll find a way to spend $3,000 a month. If you make $5,000, you'll spend $5,000. That expansion feels automatic, inevitable, like you have no control over it. But contraction is just as automatic. If you only have $2,700 available after saving, you'll find a way to live on $2,700. You'll cut things you thought were essential. You'll find cheaper alternatives. You'll realize half the stuff you were spending money on wasn't actually improving your life. It was just there, and the absence of it doesn't hurt nearly as much as you thought it would. The first $1,000 forces that contraction. It forces you to live on less, and in doing so, it proves you can. That proof rewires something fundamental in how you see money. You stop seeing your income as your limit and start seeing your spending as a choice. And once you see spending as a choice, everything changes. Most people never get here. They quit at $1,000 because it doesn't feel like it's working. But if they had just kept going for 3 more months, they would have hit the point where it becomes automatic, where saving stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like baseline, where not having immediate access to all your money stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like structure. That shift is invisible. There's no moment where it clicks, no day where you wake up and suddenly feel different. It's gradual, incremental, so subtle you don't notice it happening until months later when you realize you haven't checked your savings account in weeks, that you've been saving without thinking about it, that the person who struggled to save their first $1,000 doesn't exist anymore. You're not that person. You're someone who saves. Not because you have to, not because you're motivated, because it's what you do. That's identity shift, and it only happens if you push through the part where it feels pointless. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The first $1,000 doesn't change your situation because it's not supposed to. It changes your behavior, and behavioral change always precedes financial change. Always. You can't build wealth with the same habits that kept you broke. You have to become someone different first, then the money follows. But most people try to reverse it. They want the money first, then they'll change. They want to feel wealthy, then they'll act wealthy. They want proof it's working, then they'll commit. And because they're waiting for external change before internal change, they never make it. The system broke without warning, not because something went wrong, because you finally stopped needing it to feel right. So where does this leave you? You've saved your first $1,000. Nothing changed. You feel exactly the same as you did before. Maybe a little more confused, maybe a little more frustrated, definitely questioning if it was worth it. Here's what you need to understand. Doubt is part of the process. That uncomfortable feeling you have right now, that sense that you did something hard and got nothing for it, that's not a sign you're doing it wrong. That's a sign you're doing it right. You're in the gap, the space between who you were and who you're becoming, and that gap is supposed to feel empty. Most people interpret that emptiness as failure. They think if it was working, they'd feel different. They'd feel more secure, more confident, more ahead. And when they don't feel those things, they assume they made a mistake. So they stop, they spend the money, they go back to normal, and they never find out what happens if you just sit with the discomfort long enough for it to become normal. Because that's the real skill, not saving money, sitting with discomfort, tolerating the gap between effort and reward, choosing future you even when current you gets nothing for it. That's the skill that builds wealth. And you can't buy it, you can't learn it from a video, you can't shortcut it. You have to live it, and living it feels like nothing until it suddenly feels like everything. You won't know when that shift happens. There's no alarm, no notification, no moment where you realize you've changed. You'll just wake up one day and realize you've been saving for 6 months without thinking about it, that you stopped checking your account, that you stopped waiting for it to feel rewarding, that you built a financial habit so automatic it doesn't even register as effort anymore. But you only get there if you don't quit at $1,000, if you don't quit at $1,200, if you don't quit at $2,000, because every number before the habit becomes automatic feels equally pointless. $1,000 doesn't feel different than $2,000. $2,000 doesn't feel different than $5,000. They're all just numbers on a screen until you've been doing it long enough to stop caring about the number. That's when it starts working. Not when you hit $10,000, not when you feel rich, when you stop needing it to feel like anything, when you save because it's what you do, when delayed gratification becomes so normal you don't even recognize it as delay anymore. It's just how you operate. And here's what's brutal about that. You can't force it. You can't decide to feel that way. You have to earn it through repetition, through months of doing something that feels pointless, through choosing future you when current you sees no benefit, through building something invisible in a world that only rewards what you can see. The first $1,000 is where you start, not where you finish, not where you feel successful, where you start. And starting means accepting that nothing will feel different for a while, that the reward is delayed so far into the future you can't even see it yet, that you're building a version of yourself that doesn't exist, and that process is uncomfortable, invisible, unrewarding, which is exactly why most people never do it. They need the reward to feel immediate. They need the change to feel visible. They need someone to tell them it's working, and when none of that happens, they quit. They go back to spending. They go back to living paycheck to paycheck. They go back to waiting for someday when they make more money. But someday never comes, because the issue was never the money, it was the behavior. And behavior doesn't change when you have more. It changes when you decide to be different with what you have now. You saved your first $1,000. It changed nothing about your life. Your rent's still the same. Your stress is still there. Your bank account looks only slightly different than it did before. And that's exactly the point. You didn't save $1,000 to fix your situation. You saved $1,000 to prove you could, to prove you can delay, to prove you can build invisible things, to prove you can tolerate discomfort long enough to become someone different. That proof is worth more than the money, because the money will compound, but only if you do. And compounding yourself means staying in the gap long enough to stop noticing it's a gap. Most people quit at $1,000 because it doesn't feel like progress. But what if the fact that it doesn't feel like anything is the whole point? What if becoming the kind of person who can save without needing validation is the actual goal? What if the discomfort you're feeling right now is the only proof you need that you're changing? If saving your first $1,000 felt easy, it wouldn't mean anything. You'd just be doing what you were already good at. But it didn't feel easy. It felt hard. It felt pointless. It felt invisible. And you did it anyway. That's not failure. That's the beginning of everything. The question isn't whether your first $1,000 changed your life. It's whether you'll let it change you.